Good morning, church. The subject today is faithfulness, and the portion is taken from the book of Ezra, the entire book, just 10 chapters. If you have the time, please do read, for it's a manual for situations and circumstances that hit us all of a sudden, and we think it is out of control. But look at how it's an example of how Ezra handled it. From chapter 1, we see that God's hand was working through Ezra and it remained with him. But in chapter 8, I come to this part where he proclaims a fast and prayer and fasting for all his people, and he himself gets into it. When every desire was fulfilled, why was this required? So let's get into this topic without wasting any time. From chapter 1, I remind you again, God's hand was with him, and he goes and he wants to restore the temple. His heart is what's God's desire and his desire, so he goes to fulfill God's desire. King Cyrus orders the rebuilding of the temple, and when the building begins, the Israelites are elated, they celebrate, and they rejoice at the restoration. For years and ages they have been waiting for this time, and they see this restoration with their own eyes, and it's amazing to see it happening and being involved in the happening kind of. But in chapter 4, the adversaries, the villains walk in, they slither in and they surround, and this is happening when they come to inspect what is going on. And they send letters to Artaxerxes. And Artaxerxes issues order, stop work order. And work stop order has been issued against this construction. And they have to stop. But chapter 5 is interesting because they don't heed that. What they do is they reply to the king. They send a reply against this order to the king. And by the time the king replies it, and by the time it comes here, they continue with the building of the construction of the building, understanding that by the time the reply comes, the building is ready. Expecting in faith that whatever the result, it's going to be a positive one. Positive reply is expected in faith. Now, chapter 5, verse 5 says that it was faith in authority. In authority is very important. If you have the faith and no authority, there is no faith. Faith has to be backed up with authority. If you walk in that authority, you receive it. I've experienced it personally. I've worked through various government departments, and in every department, if you do not have the authority with your faith, it is useless. Personally, this is personal. Let's go on. In chapter 6, the tables are turned, and it comes in favor of God's people, and the temple is built and it is dedicated. It's finished. And chapter 7, to add fuel to the fire, the king sponsors the dedication. He sponsors the entire event. Now, throughout this episode, which took years, we see that God was faithful and witnessed the results. Yet, we see now when he's on his way to Jerusalem, he proclaims a fast and prayer. Was it necessary? I think it was. It was necessary. Ezra by now knows that God that he worships. He knows the God that he worships. By now he knows the God that he worships. If you look carefully, we see the element of reverence, a spirit of humility, a spirit of submission, and a spirit of honor and thanksgiving, gratitude. A spirit of reverence because he recognized that the God he worships is not the one to be taken for granted. He evaluates the situation and recognizes the need that only God himself can fulfill. A spirit of humility because he orders a fast and prayer for protection. He realizes that on his own or with his people, he cannot, however, fulfill the need or the protection that is required. He cannot without God. A spirit of submission because he recognizes the potential and the risk involved. So he calculates the goods that need to be carried. He submits to him being weak or unable to carry out this task on his own, admitting that I cannot. And lastly, a spirit of honor and thanksgiving, a heart of gratitude. He by now had built up himself to give honor and give thanks to the one who deserves. He not only practiced it himself, but also taught it to others. His people, the crowd around, he taught them that he needs to practice this thanksgiving, this heart of gratitude. And in verse 22, chapter 8, verse 22, he nails it. He says, "For I was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers or horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way to Jerusalem. Since we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him." Amen.